Yeah, I would like to tell you every step's easier, but it's not. It's just a different type of difficult. But there's no question. House Republicans defied expectations. Delivered more quickly, I think, than people expected. Lots of momentum. Coming off the floor last night, talking to members of Congress and leadership, tax writers, budget folks, they felt like, to Joe's point, they had found that common ground, that sort of that design that could move it through a near zero majority, if you think about it, just unprecedented that way. So, yeah, I don't think you can underestimate how important a step this is. Not that there's not more of them, and as the reporter said, launching right away in those reconciliation discussions with the Senate and the White House. I think they're hopeful that they can reach an agreement, hopefully in March, but certainly by early April is when the two new special elections, I think, that's right, seat those two members from Florida. So it looks like that's the timetable, and that too is a pretty prompt timetable.
I'm sure you remember what it was like to get a telephone call from the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue. What did these members go through? What did Victoria Spartz hear when Donald Trump called the cell phone last night?
So I think I think to the House leadership credit, they had really narrowed the number of people who were on the fence to a surprisingly small number. And I think that's because of the work they had done in Budget Committee earlier that had really struck this deal. And so I think Congresswoman Sparks wanted to know the President administration was serious about those budget cuts, finding a way.
Is that a happy call, though? Is it, hey, how you doing, Kevin? I got a problem. Or is he upset when he calls and puts on the pressure when he needs to?
One, he's as you'd imagine, direct. No, it is not threatening. People understand. He's got a long memory. He's very successful in these primaries. You don't really have to say it much. My experience is he talks you through the need to move. In this case, it isn't even doing the tax cuts. It's creating the runway. It's a procedural step that allows you to build what tax reform can land on, which is his top priority. So normally I think positive. And they were on the phone quite a while, so clearly they had a good conversation.
Yeah, well, while we would all love to know what exactly he said on those phone calls, we do know what exactly he said on True Social this morning, which is that he wants his 2017 tax cuts made permanent, and he can hope both chambers can get their heads around that. The problem is, if you look at what was outlined last night, $4.5 trillion the Ways and Means Committee has in terms of headway, that's just enough to extend the tax cuts. So how do they actually make permanence happen?
Yeah, so one, music to my ears on the permanence. That's clearly the most pro-growth for the country and for families, certainly Main Street businesses. So that's a good thing. I think their House and Senate Republicans are both headed the same direction on permanence. They're just coming at it from different directions.
Okay.
Different baselines, sort of different designs on how they get their bodies together.
Well, tell us more about that, because the Senate wants to do current baseline, right?
Yeah.
So what difference does that make in the ultimate architecture of this policy?
So the bottom line is, today, if Congress spends, our budget organization assumes that spending will go forever. If you have tax cuts, they assume they expire. So sort of different treatment of Congress's action. And so current policy based on basically levels it was spending and says, we assume in the budget that current policy will go on unless Congress changes. What that does is delivers a smaller deficit number for them to work through, allows them, I think, a clear path to permanency. But I think, too, the House, I think on the fiscal side of this, the House is saying, should we adopt current policy baseline? Because now they're current law. We still want to tether tax cuts to the spending cuts. So right now they sort of have like rock climbers. They have this static line, the higher the spending cuts climb, the higher the tax base climbs. And so I think that'll be one of the key discussions at the White House today.
Well, speak to that balance a little bit more, because people hear a lot of jargon, they billion, trillion, nothing matters anymore. The difference between extending and making permanent, knowing that we're talking about at the moment $2 trillion in cuts. Can we actually define that cost between these two options?
So you've got to reconcile a lot of the design and a lot of the numbers on these things. Permanency really, Joe, is if you can pay for that for a decade. Yep. That in effect creates permanency. So that's
and $2 trillion is not enough for that.
No, it is not. In fact,
so what number do we need to be talking about?
Well, great question. I think it's shaped by the president's new tax proposals on overtime, on tips, on Social Security, SALT, and
because
and
those
US
could all be included here.
at the end of the day, my bet would be it will be in some form, because what I learned as Ways and Means Chairman is, you can pay attention to his tweets, but pay real attention to his campaign promises, because that's what he wants to deliver on. I know the Ways and Means Committee has been preparing options for the president since day one on those proposals. So they'll have to find a way to accommodate those priorities for the president. Yes, they will add money to that overall number. One of the questions is, are those permanent? You know what I mean? Or are those like pilot tax cuts that go a number of years? And then they're reassessed. So lots of way to sort of turn the Rubik's Cube, you know what I mean?
Yes,
to try to make this work.
Well, one thing the president made clear again, and he actually said, I've said this over and over when he was asked about it in the cabinet meeting today, is that he doesn't want Medicaid to be touched. I think he referred to it as a read my lips thing, or that it won't be that, throwing it back to the first President Bush, I guess,
never a dangerous
Congressman.
thing to say.
Yeah. Well, so I do wonder, though, when you consider the pots that are available, if that is not one of them, how steep do the cuts everywhere else in terms of discretionary spending really have to get?
So two thoughts. One, I think the president, House Republicans, Senate Republicans are all, I think, pretty much on the same page of don't touch those Medicaid benefits, but touch the program that sends money to ineligible people. Waste money, goes to undocumented immigrants, issues like that. So there are significant numbers there, that can really turn the dial on savings while protecting Medicaid itself. And then the other cuts, if you think about it, just since COVID, our federal budget has grown by more than a third. It just exploded over the last 4 or 5 years. And it's not sustainable. I mean, we're running $2 trillion deficits just from the growth of that. So clearly, they've got to right-size it back down, you know what I mean, to a more manageable budget over time, spending budget over time. And so I think that's where, to your question, where else do you need to go? You would start with, where have we grown over the last 4 years? And do we still need to be spending at COVID levels in a non-COVID world?
Just in our remaining moment, you're one of the principals of this group, Coalition for North American Trade.
Yeah.
To protect, to renegotiate the USMCA. Donald Trump says he's still headlong on Canada-Mexico tariffs April 2nd. Is that good for our economy?
It's not. In fact, I think the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trading bloc is the most consequential trading partnership in the world, has served us well in the past, and with the new agreement, the president renegotiate even stronger, especially as we seek to compete against the Chinas of the world. And so I think what our goal is to create a framework to keep that agreement in place when it expires in 2026 or is up for review. And I think those countries are very willing to sit down, work the problems with President Trump, whether it's border or fentanyl or Chinese transshipments, in the U.S. I see a big willingness to try to figure out a way to keep this trading partnership going.
That's why some think they will never be implemented. Maybe you're one of them.
Yeah, hard to know.